Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for the Cradle, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and editor and columnist for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And as usual, before we start, we just want to remind you to like, to share, to subscribe to our channel, and to please check out our Patreon page where you can support the work that we do here at the Cradle. So today we begin. It's a brand new day for Lebanon. Something that we didn't think was going to happen for ever really happened last week. And this was the election of a president. 2.5 years after legislative elections in Lebanon, the country now has a president. His name Joseph Aoun, a character not unfamiliar to us here at the Cradle, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. A former commander of the Lebanese armed forces. As we are recording, this parliament is now also debating the election of the country's new prime minister, who seems to be the current head of the current head judge of the International Criminal Court, Nawaf Salam. He is likely to be elected prime minister, and with that, Lebanon all of a sudden will have an official government, right? So, with that being said, guys, I'm gonna cede the floor to you. What do you think about Joseph Aoun's election, and what's next for Lebanon?
Well, Joseph Owen's election, there is unconstitutional in the sense that he was a sitting army chief, cannot become president. But everyone's willing to overlook that for some reason, break the
Also, a
constitution.
lot of foreign pressure. We shouldn't gloss over that. A lot of foreign pressure to elect Aoun.
Well, correct. And they were perfectly happy to breach the constitution of Lebanon in order to get what they wanted, the candidate they wanted. And this is something that, will they even contest it in the future? Will anyone even pay any attention to the fact that the constitution was breached? I don't know, because everyone got on board. He is a known entity after all. Now, he is the American candidate. Let's be clear about that. This army commander received unprecedented goodies from the Americans. I mean, giving money, I think over $100 million directly to him as the commander of the army without going through the state apparatus, which is what you have to do. With the U.S. ambassador sitting as the only foreign envoy watching military parades, it was just, unbelievable. They got
Yeah.
their candidate, but here's something that our viewers really need to understand about Lebanon, which is so complicated. I've been there for a really, really long time, and it's still confusing. But even so you have two sides essentially in Lebanon, two blocks. One is the pro-US, pro-French bloc. The other one is the pro-Iran. I mean, that's kind of how it breaks down. And the independents are, somewhere in the middle, and there are a few of them. But no matter whose candidate wins in almost all previous elections, the other side makes gains too, okay? Because there's what's it called? The horse trading that goes on. You're not even voting in the president or the prime minister. They're being selected basically by parliamentarians, okay? And parliamentarians are being paid heavily. I mean, it's a scandal in Lebanon today in achieving the election or selection of Joseph Aoun. There were MPs claiming to have been offered $300,000 and upward to cast their vote in his favor. This happens in all Lebanese elections. Regular Lebanese living in Europe, for instance, are offered free tickets to go back to Lebanon and cast their votes. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing that this country calls itself democratic, given these things. But back to my point, in which no matter which side wins, the other side has gains too. For instance, in the election of Joseph Aoun, he had to make a deal with the Shia components of the two main Shia blocks, the Hezbollah and the Amal bloc, which basically secured some guarantees from him. One, which we've been told in the media in the last few days, is that Hezbollah would be able to nominate the new incoming commander of the Lebanese armed forces. The second is that Hezbollah and Ahmad would have control over who gets selected as the Minister of Finance. It's a post they've been after for a long time. They want to settle the financial crisis in Lebanon. They want their guy at the top. The third component that we've heard about is a Saudi guarantee because Saudi Arabia also cast its vote heavily behind the candidacy of Joseph Aoun. The Saudis have guaranteed the money, the cash to rebuild all areas devastated by Israel's bombardment of Lebanon. These three things are major gains for the opponents. Plus, they have, sitting in a very privileged seat when things are very bad in a country is to have your opponents take the helm and have them really, really struggle. So next time the vote shifts your way. We see this play out in US politics, in UK politics. This is how it because all countries are struggling right now. And whoever wins has a huge, huge task to overcome economically, financially, socially, in terms of healthcare systems, social networks, etc. So, what this US-backed President Joseph Aoun will have to do is also set the country back on a steady financial course. And can anyone do that? I mean, basically, the Americans can do it, but will the Americans give him that card? Because it is in their interest to keep Lebanon weak and manage Lebanon that way in order to manage Hezbollah for the US's Israeli ally.
True. What do you make of this election, Karim?
First, Nawaf Salam is elected as the new prime minister of Lebanon just now. He got
Oh, wow.
68 votes till now, and he only needed 65. So they are
So
still
it's
voting,
official.
but it's official now. He's the new
Okay.
prime minister. If you ask me about my thoughts, I don't have any thoughts, as we all did since I was a kid. I know that the prime minister and the president of Lebanon, since I was a kid, they usually are not like strong people, or they have like their own mentality. Because in Lebanon, everything that, or everyone who you appoint, you should get the acceptance of everybody, even though if this guy is good or bad. So this is what happens in Lebanon usually, or usually what they do is that a party will ask for like five ministers, and other party will ask for four, and they appoint whoever accepts what the leader of this party asks him, and so on and so on. This goes to the judges, and this goes to like high ranked officials in the country. So if you ask me if I have hope, or I will see a change, I don't have hope, and I don't see a change. The only thing that will maybe benefit Lebanon, if the United States and their agents in the region want to really stop wars, then yes, Lebanon will be better and the economy will be stronger. But whatever official who comes, we know nothing about him. As last time Sharmin said, we only heard about Joseph On, or we only heard what Joseph On vision was 2 minutes after he was elected. We didn't hear anything from him previously. And now Nawaf Salam, I tried to research before starting this episode. I found nothing on his policies or any agenda that he comes that he will like establish when he comes to Lebanon. So nobody knows about him. We will know about him when he talks or when he comes back to Lebanon. So that's my thought. The only concern that I have, I said it last week and the week before, I'm concerned who will be the head of the Lebanese army. This is the most sensitive rank in Lebanon currently, because the head of the army, he might like give a blind eye to Hezbollah, or he will try to like really take the weapons out of Hezbollah, and that's my only concern. Other things, I told you, yani, not experience, but because I was born in this country and I know how it works. So I don't have high hopes. What the region is like calm, Lebanon will thrive. If the region is not calm, Lebanon will not thrive, because we are affected by everybody, as Sharmin said. And you said like foreign countries. Let us be more specific. Foreign countries means Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, United States, and France. And of course, behind the curtains, we have Israel. So these countries have many people inside Lebanon, maybe a head of a party, or even a high-ranked official. So, for instance, if you are a Saudi Arabian and you come to Lebanon and you like did a bad thing, they will appoint, or the judge that will take your case will be appointed by Saudi Arabia, and he will do nothing for you, and so on, so on. This is a small example. Or for instance, if you made like something in the streets which is against the law, and you're backed by a certain party, they will try to appoint a judge for your case, so you will not be like detained or anything. So that's how Lebanon works. And of course, let us not forget the bribery. Again, because these people didn't come to Lebanon because they love Lebanon or they have their agenda or because they want to accomplish anything under their name. They literally came because they take orders, and usually these are the orders that they take. Again, we have to wait and see who will be the head of the army, and the rest, the region will dictate what Lebanon will be in the next few months or years.
I mean, and don't forget, we've been in this situation before. I mean, remember the government of Fuad Senora? I mean, that was a period in which you had all the anti-resistance forces, very powerful figures, very figures willing to go the mile for their foreign, either Gulf or Western sponsors, to challenge and confront the resistance. So you don't have that as much in Joseph Aoun. Don't forget that the Amal and Hezbollah blocs supported his candidacy, not because they like him, but because they have worked with him for a long time. They know his pressure points. They know his weaknesses. They can exploit his weaknesses. You know, most prominent among them is that he has been portrayed in Lebanon as a U.S. lapdog. You know, anytime he does something that crosses the line for Lebanon's sovereignty, they can go back with those charges, and then he has to wind back a bit. I don't think this is as powerful a lineup against the resistance as the Senora, Rifi, and that cabal. So let's see. Like I said, in Lebanon, anytime one side is perceived to win, the other side always makes gains too. So again,
Just want,
another situation to wait and watch in this crazy
I
region.
just want also to clarify things for people who don't know Lebanon or have no idea about the politics in Lebanon. We, the people, we don't elect the president or the prime minister, and usually the whore is between the hands of the prime minister. The parliament elect both, and that's why usually these leaders have no power because everybody agrees on them, and they don't have usually popularity in the streets. So in the streets in Lebanon, you won't see anybody who will like protest for or against any of these positions.
And,
So,
you know, I imagine, by the way, sorry, Esteban, regular
but
Lebanese who are not pro-US, for instance, may even be welcoming this because they're thinking a very pro-US candidate can actually manage to set right the financial sector. If Joseph Aoun cannot do that, it's going to be a huge fail for him.
Yes,
uh,
Zelensky did very well to Ukraine.
So here's the thing, that we also should consider that now Joseph Aoun and Nawaf Salam are coming in while Israel is heavily bombing the south of Lebanon. Israel
Yeah.
continues to violate the ceasefire terms. This ill-fated or maybe poorly named ceasefire, it's set to end in a few days. It's set to end before the end of the month.
13 days.
By this point, the Israeli army is supposed to withdraw from the south of Lebanon, and we keep hearing all sorts of different things, as has been, kind of become the norm when it comes to the Zionist entity, in which they seem to be completely opposed to withdrawing from Lebanon. But then you have the United States, you have envoy Amos Hochstein offering guarantees to Lebanon. Nobody knows what these guarantees are. Simply the word guarantee being, thrown around, that Israel will actually withdraw. Now, we have seen Israel withdraw from some villages, from some towns in the south, allow the Lebanese army to enter. But as I said, the bombing is continuous. So, yes, I agree with you, Karim, in particular, about the financial situation, right? Like Joseph Aoun has a ticking time bomb in his hands. And, as far as the financial goes, I will always just point to our viewers and our listeners to see what was happening before October 7, 2023 with the Lebanese currency, when it was like going like this, right? Like bouncing around with absolutely no sense, with no sense of why it would be doing it. And then all of a sudden it stops. And the currency, the exchange rate has stayed at the same rate for the past a year and almost year and a half at this point. It hasn't changed. So all of a sudden, if you just look at that example, you can maybe start seeing that the whole Lebanese economic crisis, it's a pressure point, right? It's something
It's
that can be
manufactured.
manipulated.
I mean, I
Exactly.
go back to the fact that when the port explosion happened in 2020, the Lebanese lira suddenly stabilized. And in no situation anywhere would that be the case, you know?
No,
So the
exactly.
Lebanese currency's fluctuations are completely in the hands of a few people, and they just determine what it is, you know? It's
Exactly.
yeah, it's a construct, again, a foreign construct. But I do think this point about the Israeli withdrawal in 13 days, if it doesn't happen, it will be the first massive fail of the former Lebanese army commander, now the president of the republic. Um, will he ever recover from that? Do you know?
But the election of Joseph Aoun, as I said at the beginning, kind of in some ways it was unexpected, just because this is not the first time that Lebanon has tried to elect a president in the past 2.5 years. This is hardly the first time that the United States and Saudi Arabia and everyone else has positioned Joseph Aoun himself as the only candidate. Right? This is really their language. This is what last week Lebanese member of parliament were saying, that we are getting messages from Saudi Arabia and the US in which they say it's Aoun or nothing. It's Aoun or you are on your own, and we wash our hands of Lebanon.
This is
This was the
according.
so does it feel like maybe there's some kind of arrangement in regards to the ceasefire and in regards to the Israeli occupation of South Lebanon, in which maybe what is being said behind closed doors was, we will form a government in Lebanon within the 60 days. We will put these officials who are not, who are in some way or another in opposition to the resistance and to the resistance having weapons, as opposed to just the Lebanese state having weapons, which is something that Aoun said in his first speech, to like to like calm down, I guess, the Israeli entity, and to convincing them to leave. Or is this just simply
Of course,
what it
it's
looks like?
entirely political considerations. I mean, first of all, you'd imagine the resistance and their allies in the state would be interested in having a candidate backed by the Americans, because then it becomes an American problem to make sure that the Israelis are out by the 26th of January, right? And if you can't do that, if they can't manage that, then Aoun fails at the first hurdle. And then how can a failed president who cannot get occupation forces out of the states even begin to make the argument that all arms need to come under control of the Lebanese army? He can't make that argument, you know. We're and in parallel, what's happening in Syria is the Druze have now said they will not they will not surrender their weapons unless there is a state that's been formed that is protective of its minorities. And so of course Aoun will have zero ability to talk about anyone surrendering their weapons when the state is now occupied by a foreign power, and the Lebanese army, which he commanded, is not capable of repelling that foreign occupation. So there's a for sure the resistance considered. Karim, in previous podcasts, you've said you just do not understand why the committee in charge of monitoring ceasefire violations is headed by the Americans and the French, because they are Israel's main allies, right? And the reason for that, I understand why the resistance would do that, because the only player that could ensure that Israel withdrew from Lebanon are the Americans. And if they aren't able to do that, then it's an American problem. So I understand these games. Everything in Lebanon is horse trading. It literally is a village, okay, in which there are a few people, big families, wealthy families, old name families, political powerhouses that just horse trade all day long.
What do you think, Karim?
Now, first, I think there is no option for Hezbollah to hand his weapons.
You think
It's
it's not
out
going
of
to happen?
question. No,
Oh.
I don't even think about it. If you're
Yeah.
Lebanese, no, you will not think about. You will not discuss this. To be honest, let me. He has money
Who's
problems.
going to
First,
take them from them, Esteban? Who's going to take Hezbollah's
they
weapons?
don't.
That is a good question. Yes, that is a good question.
Or
I don't think
Amal's weapons, or Samir Jaja's weapons, Lebanese forces'
I
weapons,
mean,
or Drew's
exactly.
weapons.
Qatar weapons.
Who
Everyone
in
has
this
weapons.
state can take anyone's weapons? Number one.
Just a historical fact. All Lebanese parties handed their weapons in 1990. Of course, only Hezbollah kept his weapons. Samir Shaja and the Lebanese Forces Party weapons, they were shipped to Israel because they were sent by Israel. Just a fact. So, and everybody handed their weapons to the Lebanese government except him. He sent it back to Israel. That nobody talks about that about it. First and second, I said previously that these people are there because they are like somehow appointed, and because they are, they don't have their own mentality, or they don't take their own actions. I don't think Lebanese president or prime minister will care if Israel stays in Lebanon. He doesn't feel the pressure if Israel stays in South Lebanon. We have this case from 1990 to 2000, and that's after the civil war ended. And the Israelis were there from 1978 till 2000. And I remember nobody talked about the Lebanese occupation. And I would say a fact, maybe people will not believe me, but if you're Lebanese, you will understand me. I was 11 years old when I knew that Israel occupies 10% of my country. Nobody talked about it in the news. They don't teach us in the schools. And to be politically correct, the teachers don't mention that. And in the community, we don't mention that. So I was 11 years old when I knew that Israel occupies 10% of my country. So they can ditch that and they don't really care. But what will happen if Israel stays, the Lebanese army will not ask maybe Hezbollah to handle their weapons unless they made a new play and say, okay, Israel is there because still Hezbollah has his own weapons. That's why I said the only position that I care of is the head of the Lebanese army. That's my thoughts.
So, because what's happening in the south at this point, the way some people are describing it is as it's been completely flattened, right? This is a destruction on a level that maybe these areas hadn't seen before. Israel is essentially razing everything to the ground. And we have heard from them before that they will consider any new structure a military target. They are saying we want the south of Lebanon to essentially be a parking lot, and we don't want to see any movement. This appears to be the terms that they are working with because of the fear of Hezbollah, right? We have to remember also that in the north of Israel, the settlers haven't returned. Even with the monetary compensation that they have been offered, there's been no return of settlers because, of course, they feel no security. I mean, in the Gaza envelope, they feel no security because the attacks have continued, not to speak, what's been happening from Yemen. But one last thing I wanted to bring up about Lebanon, it was something very interesting last week, just before the president, the vote for Joseph Aoun. And it was the U.S. ambassador meeting with the energy minister, Walid Fayyad, and telling him that he needs to revive some of the agreements to provide energy for Lebanon. Because when we talk about Lebanon, we're not just talking about war, occupation, economy. We're talking about energy as well. We're talking about a country that does not have its own means to produce energy. And just to finish up, this deal that the United U.S. ambassador is talking about is a deal that they themselves have been delaying. It's a deal for energy sharing with Egypt and Jordan via Syria. But now that the Islamic Caliphate of Syria is taking shape under U.S. auspices, on this U.S. and Turkish support, it seems that that Lebanon can get everything that it desired and then some.
But let's always remember also that the energy that would come via Egypt and Jordan would actually also consist of stolen Palestinian gas, meaning
It includes, yes.
yeah. So I don't know how palatable that will be. I just want to point out, in all the destruction that's going on, please, guys, let's share this video. Israel spent today destroying trees in Lebanon.
Yes.
I mean, trees, okay? They're just so hateful, so vengeful and hateful. It's quite astounding. I don't know. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like this in my life. I mean, with all the people they've massacred, you think, like, why is she going on about trees? But it's that petty and pathetic. And for sure, none of this is going to hold up. I'm not saying now, I'm not saying this year, next year, whatever. None of this is going to hold up. There is no way a state that has shown this face to the world can continue to exist. Again, they're destroying those things because no matter if there's not a speck of life, if the entirety of the South is just dust, the next day, the Lebanese, okay, hundreds of thousands of Lebanese will get in their cars and go to that dust valley and start building foundations for homes and planting trees. That is because those people are of the land. Their past, their present, their future is of the land. Okay, they are inextricably tied to this land. The reason the Israeli settlers do not go back is they have no past, they have no present, and they have no future in that land. It is not theirs. They don't have the connection, love, and respect for the land they occupied for so long.
Do you think there's any significance to this is something I've been wondering to Nawaf Salam being now elected prime minister of Lebanon? He is, or I guess was, the head judge of the International Court of Justice that is overseeing the genocide case and has to rule on it against Israel. Who's going to take over for him, right, at the ICJ? I guess that's a question that stays there. And is this just another little movement of the pawns to try to get Israel, scot free? Maybe try to get them away with from this case altogether.
Well, we'll find out the moment the next lead judge is appointed for the ICJ. We'll find
But
out.
is it the case settled?
No,
No, it's
they gave
ongoing.
a preliminary ruling a few months ago, but the actual ruling is going to be in a few years, as is the case
Yeah.
of the ICJ.
Sorry. ICC and ICJ, I
Yeah,
got
but
confused.
actually, since we're
Can
on
you
that,
translate that?
last week the U.S. House of Representatives voted to impose sanctions on the International Criminal Court, on Karim Khan and everyone else. And I guess that's where we are standing currently, as in terms of international law, right? The U.S. World Police can sanction anyone they want.
Well, every time they
Eh,
do something like that to a major institution, they undermine completely the existing structures that supported a U.S.-led global order. So take away the bricks one by one of the foundations of that order, and then you don't have an order anymore. So a lot is going to play out. I mean, the geopolitical great game is only just beginning. To me, it really began on Syrian soil when the major powers first came into confrontation after the Cold War in the way that they did, and it will continue. And the reason we're seeing such atrocious, inhumane behaviors by the Israelis, their American allies, and that entire bloc is because they're also using their ability to power project. I mean, I know we're talking about their victories, but they're not really victories. They're just a salvo in a war that continues. As Nasrallah famously said, you win some, you lose some. The issue is who actually wins at the end of the day. And we are just in the most recent set of exchanges in a battle, the global standoff. There's a lot more to come.
So actually, that brings us right to the next topic we want to discuss, and this is the progress that has allegedly been made in the ceasefire talks for Gaza, 7 days before Donald Trump takes office. And let's keep in mind his threat that the Israeli captives that are not returned, all hell is gonna break loose in the region. Now it seems, according to the mediators, to Qatar and Egypt, that a final draft has been handed. A final draft of the ceasefire proposal has been handed to Hamas, to Israel. For its part, Hamas is saying that seems to be giving a bit of a bail confirmation that this is the case. They are talking that progress has been made. They are talking that as long as there's no last minute Israeli demands, as has been the case for the past 15 months, that a ceasefire deal would be in the cards. Finally, Israel, for its part, is playing the same role it has been playing all this time, which is saying it is not true, saying, you have all of these officials, Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, describing it as it would be a huge failure, that he opposes it. So
Well,
Do you
because
think
presumably any ceasefire would mean there are rules, right? Things that need to
exactly?
be
I mean, like in Lebanon.
implemented, which means rebuilding of Gaza, removal of Israeli troops from areas that Smotrich and Ben Gvir and the crazies want to occupy forevermore. So, of course, they will view it as a failure. But what's super interesting to me is that the Palestinian Authority has dared to open its decrepit mouth and insisted that there can be no situation in which Hamas retains control over Gaza. And they're taking it out on the Egyptians in this case, that has a day after plan for Gaza. They're saying, no way, no how can Hamas. This is the Palestinian Authority who's killing Palestinians in the West Bank town of Jenin every day, imprisoning, torturing, literally a mini Israel, you know?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, acting in
there's
the same way, acting as a security arm for Israel
yeah.
in the West Bank. They say that they are doing this because of what you just described, Asher. I mean, because they don't want to be pushed out of a possible Gaza government. Although everything we are hearing, we're actually hearing about UAE, US talks, for some sort of interim administration. I don't know what they're going to call it at the end of the day. They just come up with these
Well,
euphemisms.
here's the thing, we go back to a question that we hear in Lebanon quite a bit, like, should Hezbollah have ever gotten into governance? I say this not as pro or con that, but pro-resistance people have argued that they shouldn't have gotten into governance, they should have stayed in resistance. Others argue, also pro-resistance, that no, to be in governance actually provides legitimacy to influence political directions, not just military ones. It's the same case with Hamas. Let's say you got rid of all Hamas leadership in the governance of Gaza. They just go back into armed resistance. I mean, we have seen, 100 days of Israel's nonstop bombardment, and flattening of northern Gaza. And the Palestinian resistance is only killing more Israelis every day, you know? Is that such a bad trade-off? You think that even if I mean, first of all, you can't uh, enforce Fatah politicians onto the Gaza Strip. I mean, nobody respects the PA anywhere in occupied Palestine. Zero, zilch. What? In the world, okay? But I mean, Palestinian voters, they're never going to be able to hold elections because they'll never win seats, all right? Whoever comes in governance, let's just say they're technocrats and not particularly Fatah, who do you think they're governing? They're governing the resistance, whatever. It's a face-saving gameplay by whoever's trying to cobble together a day after government in the Gaza Strip, and you're just going to see that in actual fact, in practice, they're not going to be able to change things that much.
And I don't know, Karim, what do you make of because the resistance in Gaza, like Charmin say, they've been. I mean, I don't want to say reinvigorated because obviously, the scale of the attacks are not the same. They've definitely been reconstituting their forces, and they've definitely been, continuing to launch attacks. And from what we hear, a lot of these attacks are actually being conducted by the ammunitions the unexploded munitions that are littering the Gaza Strip. Last night, 60 Minutes and CBS, they had this report in which they talk, and this is footage from last May, in which they talked about U.S. made munitions littering the strip, like all over the place. You can find like the pieces of munitions that all say U.S. made in the USA. Even after a year of all of the destruction that has been unleashed on the Gaza Strip, they are still fighting. Um, I don't know, like, what is the Israeli army? Are they because they're not going to leave Gaza either, right? We know this. They are there for the long term.
No, the ceasefire will have Israel withdrawing from Gaza.
From the
Um,
Netzarim, you think?
well, we don't know. The Israelis lie about every deal they make. But I just want to point out to our viewers that feature article that will be on our homepage a little bit later, specifically on this, where our very excellent Palestine correspondent who is writing about the new tactics that we're seeing from Hamas in these many weeks leading up to today that are being very effective at targeting Israeli soldiers and making them pay a price. Okay. So he also notes that the Israelis are amplifying this narrative, although true, the Israelis are amplifying this narrative in order to be able to continue to pound Gaza?
Any thoughts, Karim?
يعني هلا previously both Hamas and Fatah, the PA, were in Gaza, and even the Israelis were in Gaza back in 2005. I don't think this is a very long time. And I think Gaza is flexible. Hamas might accept maybe some PA guys there. Nobody knows. But what I know is that, of course, the Gazans, they want the war to stop. And also Israel has to stop the war because Trump, that's what Trump wants. But I was thinking now, while you are speaking, they have two options. First, Israel doesn't like to act immediately or to like take a decision immediately. For instance, their deal with Lebanon, the 60 days, years. Even Sharon, when he died, they kept him alive like for 2 years, so people will not be shocked, and so on and so on. There's many examples of this. Israel doesn't like do something suddenly. I think the deal will also be like 60 days as they did in Lebanon. But I was also thinking if that's the case, then they have or they must withdraw from Lebanon after 2 weeks, so the Palestinians will accept the deal. That's what I think. Maybe they will keep some of northern Gaza. Nobody knows. It's so complicated. It's so complicated. If you think of a solution, within the solution, we'll think about a problem. So I don't know how they will do it, but I think they will do it because the talks and the hype in the Israeli media is the same that we read and we felt before the ceasefire in Lebanon. I think it will be very close within like 1 week or 10 days. And regarding the previous topic about should the Hezbollah join the government in Lebanon, first, Hezbollah joined the government in Lebanon following the assassination of Rafik Hariri, the previous prime minister in Lebanon, and following the 2006 war. And this should be very clear for the people. If we had a real government in Lebanon, if we had a country that protects its citizens, then yes, Hezbollah should not be part of the government. But unfortunately, the people that govern us in Lebanon, they don't care about their own people. So you have to be in the government and fight for your government. If the PA if the PA thinks logically that we have Palestine, which is occupied, which is occupied since like 70 to 80 years, then the normal thing is to protect our people. But what the PA does is that they run and try to find any resistant, not group, even individual, to eliminate him because they don't want any problems with Israel. So having such a government will lead Hamas to stay in any government. The same in Lebanon. So that's what I see. If you have a government that protects and you are a resistance group, no need for you to be in a government. But the situation in Lebanon and the problems that we Lebanese created and the West and the Gulf countries created forced Hezbollah and, for instance, in Palestine, forced Hamas to be part of the government, which I don't agree on, but they don't have any choice. As Putin said, why he entered the war in Ukraine, he said they made a very good job in cornering us, and we had no other decision. The same applies to Hezbollah and Hamas.
The question I feel like is not being asked at the moment. It's what's going to happen internally in Israel, right? If all of a sudden you have a ceasefire in Gaza, and which one would hope entails like some level of reconstruction or even just humanitarian aid deliveries, a pause, and then you have a government, a fully formed government in Lebanon that all of a sudden takes control of the south. Israel is two fronts are taken away from them, right? Two war fronts are all of a sudden shut down, possibly the two main war fronts. The Netanyahu government has been kind of holding on for dear life, almost since it came to power. Since it came to power, there was a lot of opposition to him for his own reforms, which they haven't abandoned, right? It's not like the Netanyahu government all of a sudden doesn't want to reform the judiciary to remove all of its power, taking it upon himself. He is facing the corruption trial, is still ongoing. Now he's facing accusations of having manipulated the minutes of the first conversations, the first phone calls on October 7, 2023, in what is called as I think it's called the BB leaks, this case. So, Sarah Netanyahu, his wife, is being accused of threatening military leaders, right? Or like the family of Netanyahu is being accused. So this is a situation that he has managed to avoid because of the state of war. But if all of a sudden it de-escalates, and I feel we have said this before in the podcast, wouldn't this whole house of cards just come crumbling down on top of his head?
Well,
I don't think I don't think so. I think Israelis are pretty happy and satisfied of what Netanyahu has accomplished. And I know we see many protests in Tel Aviv, but these protests are like minor compared to the people that
They're
are
getting smaller, let's
satisfied.
be honest.
Yeah, yeah, they are only the families of the captives, which are
Mhm.
let's say 150 or less or more. So that's what we are seeing, and I think Netanyahu will eventually go to jail, but within a deal. They did previously the same with Olmert. He went like I don't remember, maybe 6 months. They can
Yeah.
make a deal with them. He can go to jail like 4 or 5 months, or he might not go. He will tell them, look what I did for the country.
you're
Af-
speaking of
af-
Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister who
yeah,
was
the
jailed
former
for
one.
corruption.
So this happens. I think internally, if I was an Israeli and I saw that after this war, Israel entered to South Lebanon, Israel entered to Syria, Israel occupied all of Gaza, I will be pleased as an Israeli.
Well,
Unfortunately,
the
that's
narratives, listen, by the way, the flip narratives are being pounded every day against Netanyahu by his domestic opposition, people like Yair Lapid and others, who are saying, we did not achieve war goals. We did not achieve war goals. Why are the Israeli settlers are not back at the north, we've opened up all these fronts, there's Netanyahu is going to get pounded domestically and perceptions will change. So let's say Gaza and Lebanon, they'll have withdrawn from there. I mean, I have very little hopes for Gaza, but at this point, except actually banking on the Qataris to make sure that the reconstruction part of it is done. Like, I'm kind of hoping that'll be a guarantee. People need to live somewhere, they need to have running water, right? And electricity. Don't forget, Israel still has the ability to turn its attention to the West Bank. And we know because Netanyahu has said, and he's waiting for Trump's arrival, it may be part of their little, boys deal behind the scene is stop with the Gaza and Lebanon. Let's turn our attention to Iran. That will be on the table, as will a maybe new strategy for Yemen. And the Yemenis anticipate, because you can't bomb Yemen any more than the Saudis and Emiratis and with their US and UK provided targeting did for what was it, Karim? Like 8 years? Was it 8 years? I don't know. But the Yemenis are hyper aware that the new strategy may be assassinations and they're taking precautions on that. Also, what happened in the last few days, the IRGC reveals video footage of a missile city, a massive underground missile city in Iran. It's a whole different kind of message. People discussing the Iranian military's various exercises they've been holding, including air defense ones, which are likely to showcase what the enemy may be facing if they try to attack Natanz or other Iranian nuclear facilities. The Iranians are making a lot of sounds right now, okay? And there's a huge push starting with Khamenei's speech, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's speech from just a few days ago, talking about there's so much talk of victory on the other side, but we are also victorious in ways that people don't understand. And we need to convey these messages. And he's begun a charm offensive to convey these messages and explain to people why the axis remains strong. Like, and he didn't just say, we haven't been defeated. He's like strong and stronger, and that this will continue. So, it just goes back to like, for any action, there is always a reaction. Let people beat their chests and say, "Oh, we're victorious," etc. I understand those sentiments, but I can also see a very efficient axis that has shown us, a lot of efficiency in their existence. churning the wheels and coming up with new strategies and moving on multiple fronts and preparing plan A, B, C, D, E, et cetera. So this doesn't end. This just starts. The Israelis, Netanyahu, if he actually pulls troops out of Gaza, I mean, it's too much for Israel to bear. They cannot carry the military cost of fighting on all these fronts. They've only managed to do so because of unhindered supply of U.S. weapons. With Trump, it's likely to continue, but to what point? Because don't forget, it's not just Trump saying no more wars. It is actually his constituents who carry this refrain very loudly. It is something that resonates with the American public. Why are we giving money, especially with the California fires, the LA burning to the ground? Why are we giving this money to Ukraine? Why are we giving this money to Israel? Why are we spending all this money on other people's problems? So these things, as the U.S. economy, continues to contract because there's no way to pay a $31 billion or trillion dollar debt back, et cetera, no matter how much stock market bump Trump provides for the U.S.
Yeah.
stock market. The U.S. stock market is not the economy, okay? The
And I
economy
think
is in pain, absolute pain. So there are so many things that are going to play out. But the Netanyahu government will always try to keep Israeli focus on the outside and not internally, because that's when he suffers.
I think a lot of these threats that are coming from Trump are actually designed to do that, right? To boost the U.S. economy in the short term,
Yeah.
because he's trying to open up fronts, left, right, center, up, down, with everyone. He wants everything, all at once at the same time. But I think,
Yeah, but
one thing about
Esteban, his gunning for Canada and gunning for
yeah,
Greenland and gunning
for
is a
Panama,
res-
for
yeah,
Mexico, it's everywhere.
exactly, is a resource grab.
Yeah.
We had colonialism where they actually went and ran countries. And then we got the cheaper version, imperialism. You just cause
Yeah.
chaos, launch wars, and then and do a resource grab. And now we're back to the empire suffering financially and economically so badly that they're talking about these resource grabs in the open, but they're talking about doing it to white country. And this is why everyone's balking, let's be honest.
I'm
Exactly.
excited.
You're excited for
Wallah.
this.
That's your excitement face, Karim? Oh my God.
It's been a long year. It's been a very long year. I cannot blame
Yeah,
Kai.
but I just want to comment something on what Sharmin said. We should not forget the West Bank. If
Yes.
the Israelis withdrew or made a deal in Gaza and in Lebanon, and they already took hold, yeah, in Syria. So now they have the West Bank. He can withdraw and keep the attention on West Bank, because there was a leak that was released in the Israeli media yesterday, or Hebrew media yesterday, that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, they were very angry that Netanyahu accepted that he should end the war in Gaza, and they told him we should not end the war. He told them, no, we should have a very good relation with the United States and Trump, because we will do wonderful things in the West Bank. That's what the Hebrew media said yesterday. So he still have this option, which is the West Bank. He can shift the focus from the internal conflict to the West Bank.
But just to point out to this, a wonderful reader sent me a tweet recently on things that we're not aware of, because we just never see Jordan covered much in any media, Arabic or English. But there's a case from a few months ago when there was an attack on the Israeli embassy. The Jordanians, much like the Palestinian Authority, are totally Israel's cucks, right? They have launched a massive legal intelligence security case against the perpetrator, but have arrested neighbors, have arrested friends, have arrested acquaintances, have arrested family members. Okay, the kind of collective punishment stuff we see the Israelis do, they've gone all out on the attacker. What's important is, it turns out the attacker, some of the people they've arrested, are in the army and the security forces and the police forces in Jordan. These people, I mean, don't forget that over 60% of Jordanian citizens are Palestinian of origin. And when the West Bank was taken in 1967 by the Israelis, these families and were split up, and they have an absolute and immediate and regular connection with each other, not like in the Golan Heights where they haven't seen each other forever, et cetera, from that occupation. The anger, the impotence that has been growing in Jordan and these populations, and just Arab nationalist populations there, and proud Jordanian, East Jordanian populations there, the indignities that Jordan has to suck up, not just from Israel running, loose in Jordan, but from the Gulf countries that treat Jordan as a dog. Here's some money. Do you want it? Do you want it? We're going to take it back. You want it? You have to do this. Jump through hoops. It's humiliation after humiliation. And what's the worst thing for an Arab man, Kadeem? Not even death. It's humiliation. Okay. And so these things are bubbling. And so if Netanyahu's government goes hard and heavy on the West Bank, Jordan's going to percolate. All of these things are placeholders. These constructs the West and its allies create so that it looks like they're running things. They're constructs. When the pot boils and the people won't take things any longer, you're going to see a transformation. Like many commentators mentioned at the beginning of the Arab Spring, that the real Arab Spring is going to happen in Jerusalem and the Arab Gulf capitals, etc. That is yet to come. I mean, I gotta say, I know I said this last time too, but as someone who has political worldview, there are many setbacks that I've felt personally. But as a journalist, I'm so excited because there is so much happening. There's, especially as a geopolitical analyst, that's been the main kind of journalism I've done. This is an extremely exciting time because it's when change happens. You are having a massive confrontation of two poles, minimum two poles. We didn't have that for decades and decades of a unipolar world. Now that you have two poles at play, many things can change. And the worst thing in my mind for this region is stagnation, staying in one place, treading water for decades and decades, losing your resources, losing your dignity, losing your sovereignty, losing your borders. We need a confrontation, hopefully not a deadly, fatal one, but we need confrontation in order to switch to real governance and real sovereignty. So for me, this is an exciting period.
So before we wrap up for this week, one thing actually first I want to bring up as in regards to the West Bank is that to keep an eye on Trump's inauguration on the day of the inauguration, because he has officially invited West Bank settlement leaders. The leaders of the Yesha Council are going to be official guests of the incoming U.S. president. So I think that tells you enough.
Miriam Adelson's friends, right?
Exactly. All of her,
I wonder how long her guest list was. Did she have carte blanche? Are we going to see like mostly Zios on that podium?
It for sure, like no doubt. We know his cabinet. When he named his cabinet, it was just like who's the biggest Zionist. It was a contest there. As far as what you're saying, Charmaine, Iran today is having talks in Geneva with EU nations in regards to sanctions removal, allegedly also about nuclear talks. On the other hand, hearing that the fatwa against weapons of mass destructions may have been lifted. We keep hearing, with these reports, you always need to take them with a slight grain of salt because they've been going for decades at this point. But it does feel like something has changed, as you were just saying. It does feel like, or maybe more than feel, you would think that it's time for Iran to realize that this is no longer going to be settled on the diplomatic table, especially with Donald Trump.
Yeah. Okay, so we're, from the top levels of Iran, the decision makers, we're not hearing this talk about like going nuclear. I suspect if they go nuclear, something will have changed in the region and we will have more reason to suspect they'd go nuclear. Let's not forget a story that the Cradle covered just a day or two ago, which is that outgoing CIA director William Burns made very clear in an NPR interview in the last few days that there is no evidence. This is the entire U.S. intelligence community now. He finally said that there is no evidence that Iran has any nuclear weaponization program in play since 2003.
This was
Okay.
William Burns, right?
William Burns said this. What are the Israelis going to say? We have intelligence that Iran is building a nuclear weapon and they will have it in a month. It's a refrain we've heard for decades. And now the outgoing CIA director said no sign of weaponization thus far. It might be because we've seen from time to time the Americans come out and counter an Israeli narrative when they're getting really worried about the Israelis doing something very foolhardy that will have major blowback for American forces, right? As we saw in Israel's strike on Iran, was it November? I can't remember. Where the Israelis were talking about like hitting nuclear sites and infrastructure, and the Americans didn't allow it to happen. So was this the parting shot from the CIA director? Don't try to play fast and loose with our troops and our bases in the region in West Asia. Or did he just let slip a major concession that the U.S. has known since 2003 that Iran has zero weaponization program? But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it should be very interesting to see, especially with the Trump officials. We know Tulsi Gabbard, who has fluctuated, between anti-war and then like just a regular U.S. official stance, as the head of or as the coordinator, right, of all intelligence agencies. You have the new defense minister. I forget his name, but this is a raging Zionist. But at the same time, it has been tasked with removing, right, all of the generals that Trump doesn't get along with, right, at the Pentagon.
And
Go
don't
ahead.
forget, Tulsi Gabbard basically burned her career over a trip to Syria to see what was going on in Syria during the war, and did in fact meet with then President Bashar al-Assad, which was a career breaker for her. I mean, she just couldn't come back from that. But her refrain after returning from that trip is, we are aiding al-Qaeda in Syria. Why are we aiding al-Qaeda? She knows very well who is running Syria today. And that's what I'm going to be interested in hearing from her as the head of intelligence. She will have all that information at her disposal. She will know what they're doing. Is she going to change her tune? Or is she going to make clear, that this is not a friend that we can count on? Where she actually goes with the official narrative, a belief system that the U.S. has publicized since the war on terror, right? Like, if she's a believer in that, she's going to go. She's going to go the other way than the neocons, who don't care who's there, right? They're happy to work with ISIS and Al Qaeda. But this is something, and maybe we can leave it at this, but I think Syria is in another area where the pot is boiling, where people are banging their chests and saying, victory. The Israelis have occupied 50, 60 kilometers into Syria. We have our guys in Syria. Iran's out, Russia's out, Hezbollah's out. Wait a tick. Syria is in a very difficult and complicated phase. The honeymoon period, despite the flood of Western leaders making pilgrimages to Damascus to shake the hand of Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, right, former ISIS and al-Qaeda leader, they're basic things. You can only sail so much on PR, right? Electricity, water, fuel, food, ethnic and religious conflicts. These are getting bigger and bigger every single day. We now have the head representative of the Alawite sect in Syria making a big speech saying, we have listened to you, meaning the new Syrian leaders. We said, we pledged our allegiance to you. We said, we will follow what you say until we see otherwise. But now we're seeing otherwise. In Homs, in Hama, in Damascus, in all areas, we are seeing Alawites and other minorities disappearing, being kidnapped, being tortured, being beaten, being killed viciously. This is continuing. Theft and lootings in all our areas. And there's no recourse because the entire judicial system is at a standstill, according to a Syrian lawyer who just announced this, I think today, that no work is taking place in Syrian courts except for cases limited to government business, finances, population counts, that kind of thing, real estate. And we also have a senior Druze sheikh confirming that the Druze will not surrender weapons until there is a state is formed for all Syrians, including the minorities and the protection of minorities. So the honeymoon period for Jolani is definitely coming to an end. All these things are things that are going to be managed. The situation in Lebanon, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Lebanon, the project, the American project for Lebanon, right, rehabilitating Lebanon, and putting Hezbollah further on the back foot. The ceasefire in Gaza, making sure that's implemented and resistance doesn't rise again. The West Bank blowing up, Jordan blowing up, Yemeni attacks, the new Iranian show of military strength. These are all, and what the Russians are going to do when their hands are freed after a deal with Ukraine, like all these things are just starting.
And you're right, because in Syria, it's been barely a month. It's insane to think about it, but it's been like a month and a few days since the fall of the Syrian government, since the rise of former ISIS Al-Qaeda warlord to statesman, right, to the president of Syria, apparently now. And as you're saying, the disappearances, also hundreds killed in the north of Syria every day. There's the death toll rises between these Turkish-backed factions and the Kurdish groups. In the south, as you said, Israel has. They're talking about keeping about 15 square kilometers in the south of Syria as a control zone, and then they talk about an intelligence area of about 60 kilometers. So all of a sudden, you have Israel trying to take a chunk of Syria that is larger than what the U.S. controls in Al Tanef, basically, right? In the tri-border area nearby.
And talk about the U.S. military wanting to set up permanent bases there.
Yeah.
I don't, like, how is Trump going to greenlight this? Trump doesn't want those bases there. If he reverses and goes back to his early administration, just says, let's get out of Syria and Iraq. We have our friends can take care of business there, right?
I mean, he seems to be reversing a bunch of his policies from the first administration, even including the, if you want to talk internal U.S. politics, this whole uproar about the migrants, right? He talks, no, we need people to come from outside because of to get jobs.
That's not really a reversal of policy. He wants rich migrants. He wants people who can bring money and capabilities.
He doesn't want people fleeing poverty and famine.
No. Those are just
engineers.
Yeah.
The rest are not wanted. So I think with that, we can wrap it up for this week. We want to thank you all for joining us. And again, we want to direct you to our Patreon page where you can become a supporter of the Cradle, and to please follow us on X, on Telegram, on Instagram, and of course here on YouTube. For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmeen Narwani.